Hello all, Northern Cincy Rider here. Today I'm going to talk about my new Sargent comfort seat that I ordered. And what I wanted to do is show what it was that made me want to get a different seat than the OEM seat, although I did have the comfort seat on this bike. So one thing I hear a lot of people talk about is the cushioning of the seat and how comfortable it is. But for me, the thing that I really didn't like about the seat was the way it was angled and the way I felt like it was always pushing me forward. And so to show that, I kind of put together a little bit of a grid that lets you see the amount of flat space on the seat as well as how much it curves up, and then we'll talk a little bit about the difference between that and the Sargent seat. So to start with, I wanted to make sure that the bike has the same orientation on the center stand as it does on the ground. So what I did is I sat on the bike, I compressed the suspension, and I had someone put tape down with a laser level to show where the bike was level standing on its own. And so you can see here we have the same orientation on the center stand, and it's at the same level set as when it's on the ground. To do that, I had to prop the front wheel up a little bit with some wood. So now that we know the bike's at the same orientation, I created a grid that I think will show where we can measure, and this is square inches, but we can measure how many inches the seat is flat and how much it rises. So let's look at that. So before we look at the grid, I do want to show that the bike was level, as well as the grid is also level to match the bike. So if you compare the OEM seat to the grid, you can see that there are about 2 inches in the front of the seat where it raises up. Then you have about 10 inches of flat surface, and then it starts to curve up a total of about 8 inches. So my biggest issue was in the section back here where it tends to push me forward into the motorcycle. So I'm curious to see if the Sargent seat has a different profile. So I ordered the standard height Sargent seat, and I was curious because it does state that it's about 3/4 of an inch lower than the standard OEM comfort seat. So I did put a little mark right here on the grid that shows about the height of the current OEM seat. And so I'm curious to see where the Sargent compares to that. So this is the Sargent seat for the BMW F850GS. I went with a graphite gray bead on it, which I thought would look pretty good with the bike. It looks like it matched pretty well. I kind of guessed at it. So you can see the profile is a little bit different, although it does seem to rise a little bit, but we'll see how that looks on the bike. So one thing that I think most people generally know about the Sargent seats, but you may not, is that underneath they do include a flashlight that's USB charging for emergencies on the road, which is kind of nice. Okay, let's take a look at how the weights compare in terms of the Sargent and the OEM seat. So the Sargent seat comes in at 6 pounds, 6 ounces. And the OEM seat comes in at 5 pounds, 9.4 ounces. I don't think that's that much of a difference, honestly. So as you can see here, the Sargent seat does also dip the first 2 or 3 inches, but then it straightens out for almost 15 inches across, and then it does raise up rather steeply near the end. So I think this will do exactly what I want it to do, which is it won't push me towards the front of the bike when I ride. The other thing you can see from the mark that I made before, right here, is that this seat does look like it drops at least 3/4 of an inch lower than the other seat, which will help just a little bit. Even though I'm 6'1", I don't have too much trouble touching the ground, but it will help me just that much more, especially when I'm in gravel or dirt. And here is the final result. I think the gray matches pretty well with the bike. And it definitely does not push me forward towards the front of the bike like the other seat did. In all honesty, it does seem a little bit harder, but we'll see how that feels once I break it in a little bit.